they're organized, they're coming in as a regular group, and also some chiefs. So Chief Crothers came in. He was an assistant chief at the time, citywide tool commander, and Chief Fellini came in. They were both not involved in the collapse. And so what we determined was that I was going to be like at the point, then Chief Fellini would be back, and I would send runners or whatever I needed to get what I needed from him. The handy-toy communications were not great. And then Chief Crothers would be further back, organizing a much bigger command post and organizing the units as they came in and as they reported.
So you literally set up a runner system?
We did a lot of that, but when we could use the handy-talkies, we did. And then, although I wasn't involved in this, I'm assuming that on the east side of the site, Chief Nigro, who had been at the time was the chief operations, he was doing kind of what we were doing. And then to the south, Chief Hayden from the 1st Division was running his operations. So I knew of 2 for sure and a third. We had basically sectored it off, but mostly because of the collapse debris. There was a bridge, a walking bridge from the World Financial Center to the Trade Center. That collapsed. That basically divided the west side, north and south. So we were north of it. Chief Hayden's group was working to the south of it. And basically then it was try to do what we could. We were limited with water limits. We were trying. There were a lot of cars still in place. Many of them were on fire. That was contributing to the poor visibility. A lot of black smoke. So we were able to get one hydrant working on the corner. Started knocking those down. Then we were kind of doing an area search of anybody that we could see visibly. That we would not have to do any tunneling or anything, but somebody like a surface search. That was...
These are victims.
These are victims, right. And the only one that I remember, we got reports of some, and then we would send maybe a company, send 5 guys to go look at that one. But we weren't doing any tunneling or anything at this level. We were doing surface victims and anybody we could see. Anybody maybe trapped in a car or something like that.
About what time is this?
This would be maybe within 15, 20 minutes of the second collapse. It didn't take that long.
But this really happened pretty quickly, it sounds like.
Yeah, I guess you could, I don't know how to get an exact timeline. But yeah, I guess we were walking around for a while, but after a while we said, okay, now we'll get organized again. So, I don't know how long that period of time took. It's actually, there's an exhibit in Washington it's called the Newseum. It's not, it's part of all the federal things, but they actually have a section there dedicated to 9/11, and they have some film. And they actually had some film from a independent photographer who died in the second collapse. Mm-hmm. But I guess he died in the second collapse. And they got some of his film. And you can see pictures of guys walking around in between. I'm in some of those. Somebody told me they saw me in the museum, so I actually went. I was down there and I actually looked. So that would have been probably between the first and the second. But for the second one, then we're basically working again like we would. In other words, what do you need? I would radio back to Chief Fellini. I need a company to go address this incident or where they think somebody is, and then he would, if he ran out of men, then he would radio Chief Crothers. The only interesting one I really remember that stands out, I think it was 6 World Trade Center, which was not that tall a building. It's a federal building. I think the Treasury had some offices in there. And a guy showed up at a window with like a clean shirt and tie on. He must have been in the bathroom or something when all this went on. But now he can't get out, But So I saw a battalion chief that I knew and told him get a team and go get him. That's one thing I can remember. And the other thing that stuck out, which again because you realized we were finding some victims that were deceased, and it always bothered me that some of the firemen or officers were saying, well, what do you want us to do with them? And I was like, well, you have to leave them. We can't get into removing things now. We have too much work to do. Maybe we'll find some other people alive. They're just going to have to stay there until we can address it later on. And that's not the way we would normally operate. We always were very respectful of people in fire situations, and I didn't like that. But I didn't see a way around it. We didn't have the manpower yet to do that. And so this type of stuff went on during the day. Look here, look there, send a few guys here, report if somebody maybe going to be available. We were really hamstrung with the lack of water.
Why was there no...
The water mains were broken from the collapse.
The collapse of the building.
And what ended up happening, 7 World Trade Center, which was a 50-story high-rise, that caught on fire. And throughout the early morning hours, we really didn't have enough water to even address that. We had one of the deputy chiefs went in and took a look at it for us and said it was already beyond what we could probably handle, and certainly beyond what we could handle because we didn't have the resource and the water right there. What had happened, I don't know if you were aware of this, the Office of Emergency Management had their offices around there. I think they're in the Verizon building. But what had happened was when the North Tower collapsed, it sheared off about 6 or 8 floors of the corner of the building. So structurally it didn't even look real good, but it also had a pretty good fire going on many floors. So basically this deputy chief came back and said, it's too far gone, we won't be able to do anything with that. And ultimately we had to pull back again, and because that collapsed later in the afternoon. Chief Nigo had set up another command post now on the west side, but that was later in the afternoon. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So we continued to try to get water. In other words, I assigned a deputy chief, a battalion chief, take a couple of companies and establish water, even if you have to stretch to the river and get water that way. We ultimately did with an old fireboat, and that did supply a lot of water for the while. Just south of us, they were doing a little better. They had better water. After about, I'm not great on the time, after a few hours of this working on the north end, Chief Fellini said, look, I need someone to go to the other side, to the southern part, and see, do they need help or can we get some help from them? Because we weren't, with the lack of water and the lack of manpower, we weren't putting, like I said, we have an office building, a 50-story office building we're not really even addressing. So I made my way through the World Financial Center and around some debris and was able to defront the building, go over the debris field and get to where Chief Hayden was with his sector of fire. They had water. They had better water. They had a tower ladder operating, and they were basically handling what would have been 2 or 3 second alarms in different buildings. And but they were doing okay with it. Not great, but clearly they weren't in a position to send us any help, and they could have used help, But they were doing better than us because they had water. But that took like 45 minutes to go half a block in reality. Then it was come back through there, and then we just operated in that position. I operated there for the rest of the day, pretty much.
So by now you're in plus or minus mid-afternoon. It sounds like.
Yeah. What had happened was, I don't know if they put down here when 7 collapsed, but
on the page, Chief.